Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're so glad to welcome you as part of our community tonight. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and distributed live stream. By entering this virtual meeting room, you give your consent to be recorded and distributed by Simeon Moro EU and other third parties. If you prefer to not be recorded, please turn off your camera and microphone or go to the Facebook Live video feed. The link to I will now place in the chat room. For a better experience, please turn off your microphone and set your video to gallery view. Tonight, our featured guests are Michael Kraus, an opera singer and artistic director of the Vienna State Opera's Young Artist Program, and three of the program's young artists, Stephanie Maitland, a contralto, Eric von Heiningen, a baritone, and André Joël Harrison, a pianist. Also joining us tonight is Professor Niels Moos, Director of the Opera Masters Program at the Music and Arts University of the City of Vienna, and Professor Lino Rivera of St. Mary's College of California. Mr. Kraus, welcome.
Hello, good evening.
Tell us a little bit about your own work as an opera singer and how you came to the Vienna State Opera's Young Artist Program.
Well, first of all, good evening to all viewers, and thank you for having me at the program. Yeah, I've been a singer for more than 40 years. I'm Viennese, just by origin, and then I started out as an actor, and just by coincidence, I ended up as an opera singer. I even sang in the US. I vividly remember being there in San Francisco, singing Papageno, for instance. But most of my career I've passed in Europe. Normally, singers of my age, they started out in smaller houses, then going to bigger houses and ending up into international houses. So that's how I sang. And this is how I developed my career up to the time now that after 40 years, I was asked to take it over and to take over the program of the Young Artist Program. And I gladly accepted that because I think this is a wonderful ending of a singer's career, just to give on certain experiences.
That's lovely. Tell us a little bit about those changes. You said, so you started not by chance, but you were a singer and then you went to smaller opera houses. How is that different today? Tell us.
Well, it is different in that way that agents at that time just toured through German-speaking countries every year and were looking for new talents. So slowly and steadily you grew from a smaller house to a middle-class house to bigger houses, and then you got an engagement, let's say, in a big house for one production, and so it slowly developed. Nowadays, people don't go through these opera houses, the smaller ones, which I think is a pity, and they concentrate more on competitions and on young artist programs to pick their new talents in order to launch them into a bigger international career.
So these agencies and young artist programs act kind of like filters. Tell us a little bit about your young artist program, and as I understand it, the new direction of the Vienna State Opera decided to make this program. Tell us about their idea of this program and what is your mission? What is your vision of this program?
Well, first of all, normally young artist programs are directed by coaches or by stage directors. It's quite rare, but not absolutely impossible, that they can be run by singers. So I always compare myself with a carpenter, an older carpenter, training younger carpenters in their craft. So this makes quite a difference because I have to serve as a role model, and I asked that I have next to me other role models as singers. So we created a kind of a network of singers who are just surrounding these 13 singers who are now in the Young Artist programs, and to establish a stable relationship, which means we are not so much into master classes where a famous singer comes for 5 days, because our system in the Vienna Staatsoper is a repertory system. We cannot have big singers being surrounded for 1 week, just listening to somebody. But I wanted a direct connection between an older singer and a younger singer, and these young singers, they need role models just to understand how this profession works.
And tell us just a little bit about what are your days like? What is it when you're part of this Young Artist program? You personally, also your singers, how does each day happen? I guess you get out of breakfast.
Every day is a little bit different because, first of all, we have 3 columns. The one column is the repertory system, and they are already from the first day included in that system. So, which means I have to pay attention who I can have in my coachings, which are normally done in the afternoon, because in the mornings and in the evenings there are rehearsals. So it's quite a tight schedule for them sometimes. I try to avoid that they are going to work for almost the whole day, but every day can be different. And this week we have 2 different productions because it's a very special day today, because after 6.5 months, the cultural venues are opening tonight. So just at the moment, the Vienna Staatsoper, after 6.5 months, reopens its doors with a performance of Faust, where gladly enough there is nobody in there, so I could bring 2 of my members to join me tonight. But there are 2 other productions, one on Saturday and one on Monday, which will be L'Incoronazione di Poppea and a children's production of The Barber of Seville, where many, almost all of them, are in the productions. So if they are not so much in productions, we can work on things they are not normally doing, like bigger parts they might include into their repertory. So that's the main issue, what we do.
Fantastic. And congratulations on reopening the Opera House then. It must be a very emotional day for all of you.
Absolutely.
So, Mr. Kraus, I'd like to introduce Professor Lino Rivera of St. Mary's College of California. He has a question. Lino?
Herr Kraus, it's a pleasure to meet you tonight and to hear what your program is about. For us here in the United States, we do not quite understand what a repertory system is. Could you please explain a little bit about what that means for us US audience?
Yes, I can, because formal opera houses just had a stable ensemble, which means 30, 40, 50 people in a house, and they changed the repertory, they changed the operas almost every day. They changed the cast almost every day. So now we have a kind of a mixed system, we call it block system, where we still have much more performances of opera productions, I think, than in the United States, which I would say they have 10, 15. I'm not talking about the Metropolitan Opera, they might have a little bit more, but only for 5 performances. This is a kind of a mixed system, but the repertory in Middle Europe is much vaster than in the United States, generally speaking.
Fantastic. So, Mr. Kraus, I believe that you have Stephanie Maitland, an alto from Scotland, with you. Can we hear her sing a little bit?
Yes, I'd like to introduce Stephanie. She came here because I was absolutely fascinated by her voice, which is a real alto voice, which is quite rare, especially if it's a young singer. And I want her to sing an aria which is, I'm sure, quite unknown in the United States. It's an aria by an Austrian composer. He's called Wilhelm Kienzel, and his opera is called Der Evangelimann, and she's singing an elderly lady who remembers her young days. O schöne Jugendtage, Stephanie Maitland.
Fantastic. That's just lovely. And an applause from Professor Niels Moos, which is not every day, so wonderful. So Stephanie, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us how you arrived at Vienna and what the Young Artist Program's like, why you decided to come to Vienna.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's really wonderful. So I am from Scotland, and I'm from quite a small part of Scotland. Basically at the end of my training, at the end of my studying in the UK, I wanted to join a Young Artist Programme, and I was so fortunate that this wonderful man here saw something in me that was worth taking. So yeah, no, it's been such an amazing experience. I think what I've really discovered is sort of being a contralto and having that really accepted here, whereas that's maybe not how I found my voice maybe accepted in the UK. But I think what's been so wonderful here is I've really been able to hone sort of being a contralto and really work on my lower register.
And I'd love to bring in Professor Niels Moos to ask him a little bit about what his thoughts were when he heard Stephanie Maitland's voice. Niels, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Yeah, Stephanie, wonderful to hear your voice. Yeah, it is actually funny you say it's not accepted in England because you do have a rich tradition of contraltos in England, or in Scotland, Great Britain, sorry. So of course, we have Kathleen Farrer, we have many others. Huh? It is a very rich tradition that you have there, and also from the oratorios and so. But maybe things has changed. Of course, we are very happy that you are here now.
Thank you very much.
So, Mr. Kraus, and what? So this is, you heard this lower register that Stephanie sings in, and tell us. So, is that exceptional? What you to hear a woman with such qualities in the lower end of her voice?
First of all, if a 24-year-old girl sounds like this is very exceptional, because if you look at her, you would think she is Susanna or Gilda, and now she opens her mouth and out comes puring sound of very low voice. But you will find out this is not the only thing, because she has very good high notes. And I remember when she sang for the management, which is the final thing, we have three eliminatory processes. The first comes through the internet. The second, I'm working with the people. I want to really look into their eyes. I want to have them in front of me, because then I can really find out what is important for me. These are three things. First of all, of course, talent, then intelligence, and third, discipline. And these things are absolutely necessary to have a long career. And I saw that in Stephanie, and I remember when she sang the second aria, which she's going to present tonight, everybody was laughing and saying, okay, and there was no discussion whatsoever. We had discussions about other people, but with Stephanie there was no discussion. She was in.
And I understand that you had over 1,000 applicants for this year?
Yes. It was 1,003, just to be precise. It was like Leporello. In the end, we had 1,003.
Incredible. Wow. And Stephanie, what is it that you are going for? So what is it that you hope to get out of this program? Do you want to stay in Vienna? Do you want to become part of the ensemble? What is it that you're aiming for?
I mean, that would be wonderful, but that's maybe slightly in the future, so maybe hard to say at the moment. But I would love to stay in Vienna. I absolutely love Vienna. But I think for me, just again, exploring different kinds of repertoire and just sort of getting my general, musical knowledge of what I would sing. More confident with that, I think, and really honing what it is to be an alto.
May I add something to that question? It's always the question, what after these 2 years? Normally, I would say you have now experienced the big opera house with small parts. Now you go to a smaller opera house and experience the bigger parts and sing them 10 times or 15 times, that you have them under your skin. This is the normal thing. And then, if it's possible, you come back with all that knowledge you gained in the smaller houses. Nowadays, I'm a little bit reticent about these things, because we might talk about the question of how the pandemic affects our profession, which is absolutely crucial. I'm very glad if Stephanie and as many as possible could stay in the opera house.
Understood. And Mr. Kraus, you said that they're also already singing as part of some of the opera's cast.
Yes.
Is that true?
Yes. So just at the dress rehearsal of Popea, there were 5 members of the 13 just on stage, and even in bigger parts. And I'm very glad to say that they were very successful already at the dress rehearsal. I hope they will be the same on Saturday at the premiere.
Fantastic. So I believe we have another singer. We have Eric van Heinigen. Can we hear him sing?
Yes, Eric I found in New York, but he comes from California. And he will sing Saint-Ile Diamant from Les Contes d'Hoffmann by Jacques Offenbach.
de Giulietta sont in arme certaine. Il a fallu que chez mille se combat voir diable de capitaine. Tu feras comme lui. Je veux que Juliette t'ensorcelle aujourd'hui.
Fantastic.
Bravo,
Bravo.
bravo, bravo, bravo.
So Eric, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to the Young Artist Program.
Well, I am a California kid. Was born in Seattle, Washington, and moved around with my parents, but I ended up going to high school in Poway, California. I did some singing in the States, did a few of the big programs. I actually met Michael over here while I was at the Juilliard School, doing sort of their equivalent of a Young Artist Program of a residency. And we met, I got an email one day from my boss at the time, Brian, and he said, "There's this guy from Vienna here who I think you should talk to." And I said, "Sure." And then I came in, and we were both lost backstage at the Met. And I looked at him and I said, we didn't know each other yet. And I looked at him and I said, "Do you know where the hell to go?" And he said, "No. Are you here for the audition?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Okay, I'm lost too." And then,
Very good beginning.
yes, yeah. And yeah, then one thing led to another. It sounds like I'm telling our love story. And then I ended up moving here to Vienna.
Well, just to explain it a little bit, he has a very special voice. You wouldn't believe the voice sounds older than he is, but Eric is still 27. And I was just looking for a very special part in the contemporary music opera Henze, das verratene Meer. And I said to myself, this is the man, I'm sure. And I went here and I said, I got the right cast for that. And so I brought him over and they said, okay, why not? But since then they have found out that he's not only good for contemporary music, believe me, he's very incredible. He's incredible by learning very fast. And if I ask him, can you do this? He asked me when, and I say yesterday. He said, okay, tomorrow. This is the way I want singers to be, singers in the future.
And Mr. Kraus, tell us, so what is this special quality you're talking about? Can you describe that a little bit? I understand in contemporary music that's important.
Okay, then you leave, please. No, we have already talked about that. He has a kind of a dramatic quality in his voice. He's still a Mozart singer because of his age. But in 10, 15 years, I can hear parts he should not sing on stage now. But here in the room, we can test that. And a part of that test you will hear as the second.
Understood. Professor Moos, any comments, any questions?
No, of course, it's Eric. It's an extraordinary voice, and it's also a very big pleasure to hear you. And of course, these voices voices that are placed between baritone and bass are also not very easy to find nowadays. And of course, it's also from there, many of the big baritones, actually, they came from this register, if we look back traditionally. So it is a very, very exciting voice to hear.
And Professor Moos, maybe could you tell us when you hear Mr. Kraus talk about his casting experiences, or have your experiences at Innsbruck and at the Volksoper in Vienna, have they been similar? Are you looking for something special? Are you looking for dependability? What is it exactly that you look for when you're casting a singer?
Of course, we look for quality. We have been always looking for quality. It was two different situations. Of course, if you are in Innsbruck, of course, you also have to find an ensemble of young singers that fit well together. When I say ensemble, it's also, I think it's very important to mention that, all the small theaters or middle theaters, they had ensembles. And that is exactly what Michael was talking about. It's a very, very healthy process for young singers to develop. And that has become very difficult today. Now, I just heard today from some agents who said that they have the feeling, and many of the theaters are going back to the ensemble system. So I find that very, very positive to hear. Maybe that's a good thing that comes out of the pandemic. But of course, we look for quality, and of course, Volksoper is like Staatsoper, and Michael, he knows that because he was also singing there while I was casting director there. And it is also a theater, it's a repertoire theater, not a big repertoire as Staatsoper, but the broadness of repertoire from light opera to musical to Mozart operas to some also heavy operas is very demanding for singers also, but it's also a very good school. And of course, we have to have people that are very dependable and are, can function in a theater where rehearsal time is limited. It's also, of course, it's very limited in the Staatsoper. But I think the young singers in the ensemble, they are very lucky in that situation that they have Mr. Kraus to a long time before to prepare them.
Fantastic. So, Mr. Kraus, can we listen to Stephanie's other voice?
With pleasure. So the next and the second piece is a little aria from of La Fille de Régiment, the Marchesa di Berkenfield. Stephanie is singing Pour une femme de mon nom.
Brava, fantastic. Applause from Professor Lino Rivera. Fantastic.
Yeah, also from me, of course. Of course.
Your, Professor Niels Moos, your comment?
Yes, it's also very nice to hear. That's a piece that was a so-called Kabinetstück. Of course, this La Fille de Regiment had actually not a great tradition here in Vienna, but of course it had at the Met, at Royal Opera House, and in the English-speaking country has a very big tradition, and also this part. And this aria was also always given to someone very special. And we have heard it in a very special edition today.
Fantastic. So our first roundtable, it's about how you are working together. So Mr. Kraus, how is it that Stephanie sings something or Eric sings something, and then you coach them? How does it work exactly? What goes on?
Well, this season was a very special one. Of course, I had reckoned to do much more ensemble work, but here we still have the problems with the pandemic. So we sometimes were not even allowed to be together in two or three people. So this is something we're really missing, and we hope that we can do that much more, the ensemble work. So I was more or less confined into working face-to-face to learn arias. And as we were closed in the opera house and there only was the productions which had to be premiered, which were streamed or sent in the television, I said to them, the less we are doing on stage, which I really feel sorry for, the more we can work here. So we just tried out certain things, and I think like Evangeliman, for instance, Stephanie didn't know that. So I said, try this, try that. This might fit to your voice, because we have to come together. We didn't know each other very well at the beginning. So there was a problem. Stephanie had to learn German first, and she now speaks quite good German. And Eric, who was already more fluent in German, now he speaks absolutely fluently German. So all that came together. I had many people to teach German as well as coach them as a singer.
So it's really like probably similar to the ensemble at the Staatsoper, like you were talking about, or a sports team. You really, everybody comes together and you're working on everything. You're not just working on the high notes.
No, absolutely not. It's just everybody has his big advantages and some problems, and we are working on the problems and trying to make the advantages even bigger and make them around personality, around artist.
Fantastic. So before I get to Stephanie and Eric, I want to bring in Professor Lino Rivera, who has a question. Lino?
Yes, given the amount of repertoire that the singers are singing and learning, how do you ensure the vocal health of the singers? Because for me, I'm a pianist and I can practice 8 hours a day. And at some point, I practice 10 hours a day, and that's no problem. But I understand that singers cannot do that and should not do that because of their to preserve their health. What do you do to ensure and to guide them to protect their voice?
First of all, they come here as trained singers. Many of them have already had their master, at least a bachelor, and they have to have quite secure voices and know what they are doing. Of course, there are always problems you have, because singing is like conquering the devil for a lifetime, because your body changes. It's not like a piano which stays the same. So we are trying to do both artistically and the vocal health, what you call the vocal health, just because this goes hand in hand with each other. So if I feel that somebody is feeling not at ease, I send him home and say, just rest it, or now you're in a production which might be a little bit exhausting, don't come. So I'm really like a little bit like a father figure, bringing them to bed sometimes and let them go for running or whatever. What I have to just think everything anew every day for everybody.
So Eric, tell us a little bit about that. Like you said, we can tell that with Mr. Kraus, you're almost friends, you have a very close relationship. How is that? How is it that, how has your experience been?
Well, you know, I went through the American Young Artist Circle before I came here, and I did sort of the gamut of the things you could do in the States. And I had actually told, at first when we were talking, after a very long thought, I wrote Michael an email and I said, I'm so sorry, I can't come for the finals. I've decided that I cannot do another young artist program. I think there comes a time when a singer has to say, you know what, I will stand on my own 2 feet. And then Michael sent me this email back that showed me and told me that he understood exactly what I was feeling. And we both came to the conclusion. You said it first, and then I agreed. You said, and that's why you should come here. And so our whole relationship is based off of that, because in the United States, I was told the big difference, what sets this program apart from any other program that I've participated in, is that every other program tells you what you are and what you should do. And this is the only room and the only program that I've walked in, and these are the only colleagues that I've walked in and said, this is who I am. And they say, okay, let's work on that. So that's the crux of my experience. And I haven't booked a flight home yet, so having
Thank
a
you.
good time. Yeah, right. I don't know if I could.
May I say a word about that? Because what Eric described is absolutely right. These programs are the prolongation of a university program sometimes. And I think there is a deliberate gap between these university programs, which are absolutely fine, and real operatic life. You really have to develop your own personality and not being told what that is. And I remember a colleague of Eric who said, "It's so different here. I can throw away all my experiences I had at the Royal Academy of Music or whatever." That's not really the case. We stand on that, but now we have to get rid of some things. I sometimes tell them, "You've learned everything about your voice, and now I want you to be a singer." And that's not the same thing.
Well, I wanted to thank Eric for such a heartfelt, moving answer. That's touching. And I guess I would ask you then, what would you do if you wouldn't be part of this program? It sounds like the program is just fun. I mean, I couldn't, when you said that, I couldn't imagine myself saying, no, I don't want to go there.
Well, singers spend so much time, especially in their early years, fighting for, especially in the States, we talk about a pipeline, right? There's a track of what singers should do. And succeeding in the pipeline usually ends up in you giving up a lot of your personal happiness, your personal time, and really at the end of the day, a lot of your dignity as an artist. You end up having to say yes to everything, whether or not you believe in it. And so I have made the decision. I was going to come to Europe. I knew that without a fact. I knew that I did not want a career in the States because we don't have health insurance, we don't have art support. It's a hard life for a singer in the States. And I have a family, and I don't believe in the suffering artist stereotype. Just who has time for that? So I'm not quite sure what I would have done. I would have figured something out. I usually do. But, I'm here. Michael is stuck with me. He made me sign a 2-year thing. So, I hope you're okay.
This is the problem, as we already talked about. I want them to have the basics of a long career, which is not, I don't want people for 5 years, because what do you do with the rest of your life? Nowadays, these careers shorten up absolutely immensely by the market. But I want them to be stable, mentally, physically, and artistically.
Professor Niels Moos, I think you've known both sides. You are a European and a North American at the same time. What are your thoughts?
Yes, I think Eric is right. Also, of course, it is quite impossible in America nowadays. But I think what a theme that Michael was approaching is also for every young singer, pianist, artist. You go to a school, you are educated, you are a student. But the most difficult thing is to take the jump from being a student to being an artist in your own right. And many people will not survive that jump. It is really a very, very big thing to find yourself. And actually, you can also ask Michael, and he knows actually we are trying the rest of the life to find ourselves actually as artists, as human beings, at what we should do. But of course, for young singers, the situation in North America is extremely difficult nowadays. And it's also, if you don't learn language, and especially nowadays the German language, for many singers, it's impossible to make a career. That is a reality.
Stephanie, what are your thoughts?
Yes, so I've attempted to learn German. Michael has been so wonderful, and I think it's once you're immersed in the language, it's amazing how quickly you do pick it up. So I think that was definitely a worry for me. Like, I had lessons when I was back home in the UK. I did my own work, but it's not the same unless you are surrounded by it and you're forced to speak it. That's the other thing. And of course, you make your mistakes, you say complete nonsense, but eventually you get there. So I'm very fortunate that I'm not quite there yet, but I'm getting there.
I'd like to add to this. I was brought up here in Vienna. Everybody in the Vienna State Opera was every opera in French and every opera in Italian. And so I learned these languages quite naturally. But I made it a rule when I had to learn something in Spanish, which I did not speak. It was such a nightmare for me. Especially it was Don Quixote himself, and I was the one and only in Spain not to speak Spanish, that I said I will never do that. And I've made it a rule not to sing in a language which I cannot think in. And I try to give that on because as we are now talking, even with my defective English, I still can think in that language. If you're just a parrot, you are not a real singer for me. And so I try to give that idea on.
You set the bar quite high, Mr. Kraus. So with other language, is that right, Stephanie? You also speak Italian and French?
Getting there. My next challenge is Russian. That's the next one I'm attempting.
Because with that voice, you can sing the Russian repertory.
Yeah, but that is, definitely a work in progress.
It's a lifetime thing. And I had to learn a little bit of Czech because when I went to the Czech repertory, but I've already declined operas, for instance, in Catalan, which I don't speak. I said, no, sorry, I can't. We have language teachers that no, thank you.
Understood. So can we hear Eric sing some of the heavy operas that Professor Moos was talking about?
Mm-hmm. Yes, this is something we are fiddling around at the studio. I said, why not try it out? It's 10 years too early, but here you can hear maybe a future Wotan from Rheingold.
Strahlt der Sonne Auge in prächtigen Glut, prangt glänzend die Burg. In des Morgenscheine hurtig erschimmert lag sie herrenlos,
Bravo. Fantastic. So,
Very nice.
I'd like to ask, talk to the person that has been supporting this whole show, yet we haven't heard from the pianist.
Come. So, I'd like you to introduce a very, very special person I cherish very much. This is Angie Joël Harrison. He is, you would not believe it if you look at him, but he's genuinely Austrian. His parents come from Madagascar. And we wouldn't believe it. We have another person from Madagascar. There seem to be very intelligent and very talented people in Madagascar. But Angie was born in Vienna, and when he was, I think, 1 year old, he started his piano career. For the rest, you can ask him himself.
Angie, so tell us about this and how you got to the Young Artist Program.
Yes, first of all, hello everyone. How I got into? I had a concert in my university where I conducted because I also studied conducting, and there I met Michael. He was watching me and I was conducting Symphonie Fantastique, the third movement, and we met and we talked and I said yes, he had an idea if he would like to have this and that. Maybe how is this for you and in the studio? And then he tried me out with a few singers and it worked very, very well. And so I came into the studio.
Fantastic. And so is that what is your mission? What's your goal there at the Young Artist Program, since you're just supporting the singers? Are you trying to get to know the repertoire better, or are you conducting them at the same time, or what is it exactly that you do, and what are your goals?
There are generally two things. The first thing is I accompany the singers most of the time at the piano, and sometime I also already did start to coach some of the singers. And at the second, I'm learning the repertoire, of course, with the singers, but also for me, because later on I want to be an opera conductor, and so it's the perfect place. I'm with the young singers, with fantastic young singers of my generation, so I think that I will be together with them also in the future for a long time. And from conducting, it's also perfectly combined.
Fantastic. So I'd like to go on to our last roundtable, which is how the next generation of singer that Angie Joël has been talking about, how they have been affected by this pandemic and what the future looks like. Maybe we can start with you, Angie.
It's a little bit maybe a little bit a sad topic at the moment, because there were things stolen away from the people. Also, some of the time, and many chances, of course. But for us, and especially for me, I think we are very lucky that we still could rehearse all the time. So we had no time lost, but we're still preparing for what will come in the future, and we just use the time for mostly positive things. And you have, I think, the only good thing was that you had time to concentrate for yourself. You really had time, and I did it. I tried to learn, for example, Rosenkavalier as well as possible for me, like play it because it's a very, very one of my favorite pieces. And yes, I just tried to focus on myself also here in the studio and what I do abroad also, because I'm also a composer. And I tried to compose as much as I can. It was not possible in the last months because I had a lot of work, But on the other side, I'm very lucky to have the work because everything I do comes together at the end.
Okay, thank you for such a heartfelt answer. And Eric?
It's like Andrew said, we are very much the lucky ones in that, yes, of course, we lost performances, we lost roles, so on and so forth. But we have a paycheck, we have a space to work, and we have guidance. So, you know, it's interesting. There was a great article that came out just today, written by Fred Cohn, a big writer in the U.S. on opera, talking to artists, specifically talking to artists whose careers have been entirely destroyed by the COVID pandemic. I mean, who lost everything. And I don't think the question, it's so immense a loss for so many artists that I don't think the question is, well, how did that affect the artists? I think the real question is, how does that generation ever come back from this? And it's not, I think we're going to see a real issue with a sort of work inequality across the board, because you either have singers like us who were totally protected during this crisis, or singers who lost everything. I don't really know anybody in the middle, I have to say, and I think that's sort of the post-crisis crisis that we're going to see people dealing with, and how people salvage, you know, a total battlefield of destruction of all their work. Yeah.
Okay, Stephanie?
Don't really know how to follow that. I think these two wonderful gentlemen have sort of said it all. Yeah, just to follow on, I feel so fortunate to have been here, and to have seen so many friends like struggle and, you know, ultimately have had to choose different careers. And I think once you're sort of out of the loop, and when you're out of the feeling of auditioning for things, and, you know, seeing people that actually a lot of it is such a mental block for yourself. Yeah, I think a lot of that's what my friends have experienced, that now that they're out of it, trying to get back into it. And while things are opening up in the UK, again, like Eric said, it is sort of for a select number of singers, and sort of being able to break into that is very difficult at the moment. But in saying that, I do know a lot of UK companies who are doing general auditions, trying to hear as many singers, especially those that have just finished studying, that have then entered the world as it is now. I think they're definitely at such a loss.
Mr. Kraus?
Well, just generally speaking, when I was young, I was told being an opera singer is just a hopeless thing, because after 10 years, all those who have done their masters, after 10 years, 99% of them are not in the solo engagement anymore. So who would choose a profession with a 99% of security of that they will not make a long career? But still, there are people like Stephanie, like Eric, like Andri. He's not a singer, but as a conductor, you have the same problems just in general.
He is a singer.
He is a singer, not at the moment he's more conductor than a singer, but he's still singing. Well, you will find out just in a minute. I want to be short, just to make him for the last word. But I was not sure, and I'm still not sure, whether the pandemic will just augment the wish for culture. I have the feeling now that it is. When I see the public saying, finally, we can go back into concerts, into expositions, into opera. If that happens, I'm quite positive for the new generation, like those two. I'm quite confident for all those who are just the first-rate singers. But there is a big number of singers who are just between them, and I'm not so much so positive whether they can go on. So I cross my fingers they do.
Okay. So to end on a positive note, like you said, can we hear Angie do his special
Yeah,
performance?
I will have to explain that. Angie is not only a conductor, pianist, a singer, and you name it, but he has a certain quality which I absolutely adore, his gift of improvisation. So I've tried it out and I'm sure he will do the same now. I said, if I would ask you just to improvise on those 4 areas and add something new to that, can you do that? And he always says, sure. So can you?
Of course.
So Angie is having the last word. Just a moment. Just a moment.
Fantastic. So
Thank you.
some wonderful. Thank you. Bravo. So let's take a look at how we can stay in touch with the Young Artist Program. The address is wienerstaatsoper.at/Young Artist Program. Here we have it, the English website, the Young Artist Program of the Vienna State Opera. And here you can find application information about how to apply. So the deadline is coming up at the end of June. And here we have the young artists. Stephanie Maitland, I believe we've heard from her. And there's Eric, and there's Angie. So fantastic. And I will put this in the chat room right now. Ava Schweitzer writes bravo to Angie. Fantastic in the chat room. So if we want to
Thank
apply, you just click on the apply now. And there you have it. There's the application all in English. Fantastic. So again, that link has been placed in the chat room. So thank you so very much to Mr. Michael Kraus, Artistic Director of the Young Artist Program. Thank you to Stephanie Maitland, to Eric von Henigen, and to Angie Joël Arisson. Let's take a look now at what we have next week coming up. There we have Wednesday, May 26, Daniela P. Soyu and Sagi Silberschatz. Does extremism lead to terrorism? Extremism and terrorism are two words that we often hear and merit an in-depth conversation. What do the two terms really mean, and does one imply the other? Who are extremists and who are terrorists? Daniela P. Soyu, a researcher in those two fields at the Austrian Institute for International Affairs, and Sagi Silberschatz, a de-radicalization consultant, are just the people to have that conversation with. As always, information about upcoming shows may be found at www.simeonmoro.com. So once again, thank you so much to Michael Kraus, Stephanie Maitland, Eric von Henigen, and Angie Joël Arisson, and Professor Niels Moos. Thank you very much to Uta Sander, the artistic administrator of the Young Artist Program, without whom this could not have been made possible. Thank you very much to Professor Lino Rivera, and most of all to you, our participants, who make it all worthwhile. So from Vienna, Austria, and the Bay Area, California, goodbye, and see you next Wednesday.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.